Hello to all of my friends. Welcome to another wondrous book stream of the Lost Years of Merlin series. This is book 3 called The Fires of Merlin, and we are on part 2, chapter 10, called Hunter and Hunted. In the last chapter, the living rock spit out Merlin and his sword after some pleading, and they trekked on their way and saw the lost lands that were all scorched by Valdirg, and Rhea left. We'll see if she's actually gone. And Merlin set out toward the veil of smoke on the horizon. So, here is Chapter 10, Hunter and Hunted. Within the hour, shafts of glowing crimson streaked the sky, like the strings of a celestial psaltery. I soon reached a winding stream, flowing red in the waning light, the headwaters of the river unceasing. Crossing the narrow channel, a mere trickle of water compared to the torrent it would become in the spring snowmelt, proved easy, just as Rhea had predicted. As my boots ground against the rounded stones in the channel, I wondered if her other, more fearful predictions would also prove true, and whether I would ever see her again. Like the nameless horse from my childhood we had talked about under the stars, Rhea was more than a companion, more than a friend. She was part of me. Stepping onto the northern bank, I surveyed the lands of the dwarves. Somewhere out there in those rolling rocky plains lay the hidden entrances to the underground realm. While Ernalda would, I knew, be grateful for my help, I doubted that she guessed how much I would also need hers. It still puzzled me why she had declared that I, and I alone, could help her people. Perhaps she too knew the prophecy of the dragon's eye. Lo, nothing can stop him except for one foe, descended from enemies thought long ago. I shuddered. For a while I did indeed carry Tuatha's blood in my veins. I did not possess either his wisdom or his weaponry. And I shuddered again to think of his unmatched power of Valdirg. Disaster shall follow his waking again. Slaying the dragon in itself would be difficult enough. Evading the prophecy and somehow surviving the battle would be, I felt sure, impossible. Squeezing the shaft of my staff, I debated how best to find Ernalda, or, more than likely, to help her find me. If I made myself too visible, Valdirg might well spot me first. If, on the other hand, I hid too well, I might waste valuable time. Keep to the open, I decided at last, and stay ever alert. Soon the stench of smoke grew stronger. My eyes began to water. I entered a stretch of plain that looked more like an abandoned fire pit than a field. The base of my staff no longer swished through tall grasses, but rather crunched against the brittle stems and parched soil. Scorched brambles clawed at the smoky air. Boulders, scattered all over the plain, resembled lumps of coal, and always the smell. With my second sight, I frequently scanned the darkening sky for any sign of the dragon. As large as he would be, giving me the chance to spot him at a distance, I expected he would also be fast. Terrifyingly fast. And even while watching for him, I also watched the shadowy terrain at my feet, for I preferred not to tumble into one of the dwarves' cleverly disguised tunnels. Every indentation, no matter how slight, every unusual shadow, no matter how small, all these I checked carefully. Just then, a gruff voice barked a command. It came from just behind a massive brambly gorse to my left. Cautiously, I crept closer. Crouching behind the charred thorns, I spotted a pair of dwarves, their leather leggings and red beard catching the last rays of light. Although they stood not much taller than my waist, their stout chests and burly arms gave warning of their surprising strength. Heavily armed, each of them bore a double-sided axe, a long dagger, and a quiver of arrows. They had just drawn their bows, in fact, and were hurriedly knocking their arrows. I turned to see a pair of deer, a doe and a stag, cowering at the back of a steep gully rimmed by blackened boulders. No doubt the dwarfs had driven them into this trap, hoping to fell one or both of them before they could escape. The doe, tensing her powerful thighs, tried to leap up the side of the gully, but slid back down with a clatter of rocks and a cloud of ash. The stag, meanwhile, lowered his massive rack and prepared to charge straight at the hunters. The points of his antlers gleamed dangerously, yet I knew they would prove worthless against speeding arrows. The peril of the deer made my stomach clench. Myself, I never ate venison, ever since the day long ago when Dogda himself, disguised as a stag, had rescued me from certain death. Yet I had never deigned to interfere with anyone else's enjoyment of deer meat. Still, I had never before stumbled upon one of the graceful creature's execution. At the instant the arrow knocked into their bowstrings, the doe suddenly turned in my direction. Whether she saw me or not through the brambles, I could not tell. Yet the sight of her wide, intelligent brown eyes, stricken with terror, hit home. "Stop!" I shouted, leaping into the air. Startled, the dwarves jumped. Both of their arrows went wide, skidding off the rock-flaked walls of the gully. At the same instant, the doe and the stag bolted across the turf before the dwarves could reach for their quivers again. In a single, magnificent leap, their forelegs tucked tight against their chests, the deer sailed over their attacker's head and bounded out of range. "What fool are you?" demanded one of the dwarves, pointing his reloaded bow straight at my chest. "I come in peace." Emerging from the tangle of gorse, I lifted my staff in the smoky air. "I am Merlin, called to join you by Arnalda herself." "Pshaw!" The dwarf scowled at me. "Did she also command you to ruin our hunt?" I hesitated. "No, but I couldn't do otherwise." "Couldn't what?" The other dwarf stomped angrily, threw his bow on the ground, pulled out his axe. "You miserable long-legged oaf! Methinks we should bring back man-meat instead of deer." "A fine idea," snapped the first. "These days, meat of any kind is hard to come by. You won't taste nearly as good as venison. The first we've found in many days, mind you, but you'll do. Did Arnalda tell you that your race is forbidden to enter these lands?" "Go ahead," urged his companion. "Shoot him now, before he tries one of his man tricks on us." "Wait!" I protested, my mind racing to find some way to escape. "You say these lands are forbidden, yet I've been here before." Although my knees were wobbling, I stood my tallest on the charred soil. "And I have come back to help your people, even as you helped me." "Pshaw!" He drew back his bow. The arrow point glinted darkly. "Now I know you're a liar as well as a thief. Our laws tell us to kill human trespassers, not help them. Not even Arnalda, whose memories is as short as her plump little legs, would forget that." "Be that so?" demanded a sharp voice from the shadows. Like myself, both dwarves whirled to face a squat figure standing beside one of the boulders. Arnalda. She wore a hooded cloak over her black robe that glittered with an embroidery of runes. Her ragged red hair, surging out of the hood, held many jeweled clasps, ornaments, and pins. She wore earrings of conch shells, each almost as large as her bulbous nose. One of her thickest hands curled around her staff, while the other hand pointed at the dwarf holding the bow. Her eyes, as bright as the flames that had consumed my own psaltery, burned with rage. Arnalda," fumbled the first dwarf, lowering his bow. "I didn't mean to insult you." "No?" The enchantress eyed him for a long moment. "An insult be an insult, even if the person it maligns may be out of hearing." But you are mistaken." "Be I?" Arnalda stepped fully out of the shadows. "Far worse than your insult to me, huntsman, be your threat to our friend here." He nodded toward me, swaying her shell earrings. "You be about to skewer him before I arrive." My own chest relaxed, even as the dwarf panted in fright. Nervously, he pawed his beard. "But he—" "Silence! He may be a man, but he still be a friend. Oh yes, a valued friend. And more than that, he be our only hope." She glared at him. "You seem to be forgetful of my command to keep him safe after he came to our realm. Be that so?" Yes, Arnalda, I forgot." A flash of light burst from Arnalda's hand. At the same instant, the dwarf yelped in surprise. He stood in the same leggings, though they fell like loose slacks around his boots. I thought his pants had fallen, then realized the truth. "My legs!" he wailed. "You shortened them!" He tried standing on his toes, though he still only reached his companion's elbow. "They're only half as long as they were." "Yes," agreed the enchantress. "So now your memory will be no longer than your legs." He dropped to his knees, now only a little higher than the top of his boots. "Please, Arnalda, please give me my old legs." Not until you give Ernalda back her faith in your loyalty. Her eyes flicked toward the other dwarf, who stood shivering. I would do the same to you, but I be short of huntsmen just now. Slowly, Ernalda turned to me. Her face, though still wrathful, seemed a touch softer. I be sorry your return be so unpleasant. I bowed respectfully. Then, with a grateful sigh, I leaned against my staff. I am glad you arrived when you did. Very glad. The conch shell swayed as Ernalda bowed her head slightly. Your timing be just as good as my own, Merlin. You see, this be the night that Valdir will come back here. Stiffening, I glanced at the sky, darkened both by twilight and the hovering streaks of smoke. Gradually, my puzzlement overcame my fear, and I asked, You know he will come back tonight? That be true. How can you be sure? Her cheeks pinched. Because, my young friend, I made a pact with him. Oh yes, a dragon be most intelligent beast, aware of what he really wants. And in this case, I be sorry to say, what the dragon really wants be you. Okay, my friends, that is the end of chapter 10. Thank you for joining me. And Dr. V, I have not read Dune yet, but I was thinking of future books to read after we finish this series, and I was thinking Dune might be on that list. Maybe I'll do like a poll or something and figure out what I'll read after, because I want to keep doing it. And we got a couple more books to read after this one, but I haven't read Dune yet, and I've read these, so I thought maybe we could read a new book, and that would be a good one. So, good suggestion. Thank you for watching, everybody. Please come back tomorrow.